Welcome, everyone, to the 27th annual Frederick Douglass Book Prize. I'm going to thank a whole bunch of people in just a minute, but I want to welcome all of you to Trinity Church. My name is the Reverend Philip Jackson, and I am the 19th rector of Trinity Church, of parish, A parish that was founded in 1697 and has been here ever since. And we are so pleased and proud to host this event. Every year, we just love having you all and everyone who comes. And I just wanted to say a couple things. Okay, I'll confess. In addition to being the rector of Trinity, I'm also a member of the GLI board. And it's a question, which one is more important to me? It's the church, but GLI is a very close second because of the work that they do. A couple of thanks. I want to thank Jim Basker and the GLI staff, who, all of them, where are you all around? Anyway, they're doing their thing. But I want to thank you, Jim, and all of your team. You're such a pleasure to work with every year. And again, the work that you all do is not only just outstanding, it's rich in history and it's rich in the meaning it gives to so many young people across the country. So thank you. I want to thank my friend David Blight, who's going to be our MC. I actually met him for the first time at a Gilder Lehrman Frederick Douglass Book Prize, and we have been friends ever since. I want to thank especially Justene Hill Edwards, our honoree. Yes. Frankly, just for writing a brilliant book. I want to thank you for writing a brilliant book. That's a good thing, and to have you as our honoree, like I said, is just a pleasure, and it's great to meet you as well. Finally, I want to just thank the teachers and students who participate in anything GLI, Gilder Lehrman Institute. I want to thank you for your support and for your using the materials and for your involvement in their genesis. I just want to thank you because the Gilder Lehrman Institute is one of these things in the United States that a lot of people don't know about, but touches hundreds of thousands of lives in really deep ways. And so I want to thank the students and teachers who use our stuff. I want to finally, I'll just say, just thank you all for coming. Just thank you for coming. Let's have a good time, and let's celebrate a brilliant author, okay?
Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Jim Basker, and I'm the president of the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History. And I want to just welcome everyone, as Phil did, to the 2026 Frederick Douglass Prize, which we at the Gilder Lehrman Institute are very proud to co-sponsor with the Gilder Lehrman Center at Yale. And of course, special thanks go to Phil Jackson and everyone here at Trinity Church for hosting us. And I also want to immediately say congratulations to Professor Justene Hill Edwards for her prize-winning book, Savings and Trust, The Rise and Betrayal of the Freedman's Bank. I happen to believe it is one of the most important books we have ever honored in the history of this prize. As I look out here on the crowd that we've gathered in this beautiful and historic house of worship, it's wonderful to think about the variety of people who have come together to focus on Black history, such a fundamental element of our shared American story. From the RSVP list, I know that the room here is full of historians and professors and archivists and researchers. And I know that there are trustees and advisors to the Gilder Lehrman Institute, but there are also college administrators and leaders of cultural institutions and publishing houses. They're also lawyers and Wall Street investors and people from business. I know from Con Edison and Verizon, Bank of America, and others represented here. But most importantly, there are teachers and students from the Trinity After School program and from a dozen different high schools across New York City. There are about 150 students in all of whom have a chance tonight to meet and hear from a major historian, to receive their own copy of her book. Most of them have got a signed copy now, and to go home, I hope, with a deepened sense of the importance of African American history and the makeup of the community here that cares so deeply about it. And here I want to pause and especially thank Phil Jackson and Trinity Church, who are joining in a long tradition, going back really to the founding era, to the time in the 18th century when there were figures like Lemuel Haynes, Absalom Jones, and Richard Allen, extending all the way down into the modern civil rights movement, when religious leaders open their churches to the larger community and bring people together to focus on history and education, on mutual understanding and enlightenment, on the shared values and ideals that unite us. And I think it's particularly important in this time. And Phil, thank you and your people for making this possible. I'd also like to take a moment to tell you about the longstanding commitment of the Gilder Lehrman Institute to the inclusion of Black history in our work. In the 1980s and 90s, as our founders Richard Gilder and Louis Lehrman spent millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, building the Gilder Lehrman collection, which now has more than 87,000 rare documents, they made sure to include manuscripts by Frederick Douglass. I think we have more than 50 now, and thousands of others documenting Black history from the founding era down through the 20th century. And I'd encourage any of you who have interest in those fields to check out our collection, which you can see on our website. In 1995, our first teacher seminar was on the transatlantic slave trade at Yale, led by the great historian David Bryan Davis. And every year since, we have had multiple teacher seminars and other programs devoted to Black history. In 1997, when I had just become president of the Gilder Lehrman Institute, Mr. Gilder and Mr. Lehrman sent me as my first task up to Yale to try to negotiate with the provost's office to found the Gilder Lehrman Center on Slavery Resistance and Abolition, which, thanks to the really wonderful negotiations of Chip Long in the provost's office, we succeeded in doing. In 1999, jointly, we awarded the first Frederick Douglass Prize to co-winners Ira Berlin and Philip Morgan. The scholars in the room will recognize those great names. They and 26 winners since have actually formed a canon of the greatest books in the field of slavery studies. Over the years, we have distributed to our network of schools document booklets on Frederick Douglass, the Dred Scott decision, the Emancipation Proclamation, books about Black historians on the record, and many others. And when we distribute these books, they go to 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 schools across the country. I think many of the schools here will have received such publications. We have a series of panel exhibitions on different historical topics that we've developed over the last 12 years, and the most popular of them is our exhibition on the story of Frederick Douglass, and David Blight was the scholar who oversaw the creation of that exhibition. I'm pleased to say that Con Edison is today sponsoring several sets of that exhibition to go into schools in Harlem. Our EduHam program, partnering with the musical Hamilton, spectacular story. Many of the students here probably have experienced that curriculum. But through that curriculum, we were able to include 15 Black figures from the founding era, and therefore student acts on Phyllis Wheatley and Lemuel Haynes and James Forten and other figures from that period emerged in the work that students did. In 2023, partnering with the Library of America, we distributed to more than 5,000 schools copies of a volume called Black Writers of the Founding Era. And over the past 3 years, working with the College Board and our trustee and the great scholar Henry Louis Gates, We advised on the creation of the AP test on African American studies. And then last year, we mounted an online study guide, and I hope, again, many of the students here are aware of it and have used it. That online study guide, which enables students to prepare for that test, to do better on that test, even in places, such as there are some states, where the curriculum cannot be taught in schools. And I want to say special thanks again to Trinity Church, who helped to fund that particular project. Looking ahead at our gala on June 1st, we are honoring Lonnie Bunch, who was an early advisor to the Gilder Lehrman Institute when it was still in formation back in the 1990s. And of course, his great achievement in working for years to establish the phenomenal National Museum of African American History and Culture in the heart of Washington, D.C. And I hope anyone here who's interested will join us on June 1st as we seek to honor Lonnie Bunch. You can contact us for details. I felt it was important to say these things tonight in the midst of the turbulence and division that surrounds us, as a way to reaffirm our commitment at Gilder Lehrman to this field of history, to the teaching and learning of Black history as an irreducible, integral part of American history. And I'll close by saying we invite everyone in this room, from the community leaders and business people through every student, high school student in our audience, to join us in that effort, because we think it's profoundly important. Thank you for that. It's my turn now to introduce our next speaker. My pleasure to present Kathleen Freese, who is the Director of Development at the Macmillan Center at Yale. Kathleen has recently joined Yale, where she brings a distinguished career in nonprofit leadership and strategic partnerships. As she knows, I'm particularly glad to welcome her tonight, so she'll tell us briefly about Yale's commitment to supporting the Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition. Over to you, Kathleen.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kathleen Freese, and I'm the Director of Development for the Macmillan Center for International and Area Studies at Yale University, of which the Gilder Lehrman Center is a part. I'm accompanied by my colleagues who are seated up front here. I'm hoping that you get to know them. They're seated with some of our very committed friends as well. So I'd like to take the opportunity to share what brings us together, what distinguishes the two Gilder Lehrmans, and how you might participate. It's really a pleasure to be present with you, scholars, educators, students, and friends to celebrate the 27th annual 2025 Frederick Douglass Book Prize, a collaboration between the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History in New York and the Gilder Lehrman Center of Yale University, which is the study of slavery, resistance, and abolition at Yale in New Haven, Connecticut. Each year, we gather in February during Black History Month, a time not only of remembrance, but of renewal. Frederick Douglass himself once wrote, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." His life reminds us that history is not static. It is contested, experienced, and carried forward by courageous voices. Tonight, we honor scholarship that does exactly that, work that sheds light on truth, on struggle, and on extraordinary resilience. This prize stands at a powerful intersection. The Gilder Lehrman Institute brings American history to classrooms across the country, supporting teachers and students with primary sources, curriculum, and public programs. The Gilder Lehrman Center at Yale, housed within the Macmillan Center, advances rigorous scholarship on slavery, resistance, and abolition, connecting historians, graduate students, and educators in deep interdisciplinary inquiry. Together, we bridge public history and academic research, scholarship, and the classroom, ensuring that the study of slavery and its legacies remains both authentic and accessible. It feels especially meaningful to gather here at Trinity Church, an important space in American history, having witnessed revolution, slavery, commerce, and transformation. To honor scholarship on slavery, resistance, and abolition here is both fitting and powerful. Tonight we celebrate the winner of the 2025 Frederick Douglass Book Prize and the exceptional finalists whose work deepens and sharpens our understanding of the past and has the power to transform classrooms, scholarships, and communities alike. Congratulations to you all. At the Gilder Lehrman Center, we are committed to sustaining that work year-round. Join us for one of our many lectures or conferences throughout the year. Explore local history with us. Encourage teachers to apply for the Summer Institute. Engage with our Public History Institute, where scholarship meets civic life. Stay connected through our newsletter, browse our resources, explore our programs, or simply introduce yourself this evening. We would welcome continuing the conversation with you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. All right. I'm David Blight, direct the Gilder Lehrman Center. Kathleen, a very special thanks for that. Not only because you come representing Yale and all it represents, but you said so many wonderful things about the center. I don't have to now. So be it. Yes, come to New Haven, come to our events. My God, the church is full tonight. Phil, where are you? I don't know where you sat, but my first thanks is to Phil Jackson. I forget how many years now we've been coming here. There you are, right up front, of course. Why am I looking back there? You used to sit in the back. I remember that. And I warn you, Justine, as I do every winter of this, if Phil ever invites you here for a book session, he reads the book. And I've said this before, I apologize, but the most thorough grilling I ever had in the 912 book events I did about the Frederick Douglass book was right here with Phil to a packed room, and it was amazing. He knew things about the book I didn't know, which happens to all authors, actually. A special thanks to Jim Basker and all the GLI team. I always do this, but it's beyond important. I'm a product of public schools. Many of us are. But whether you're a product of private schools or public schools, we're all products of schools. Nothing is more important in the United States than the survival of the public school. It's where 78% of all people in a classroom in this country go to school every day, university or secondary or elementary. The public school is the most democratic institution the United States ever created. It helped create an American middle class. It reinvented education, for better or worse. And there is no other private philanthropic organization in the country that does what GLI does for the teaching of history, and for that matter, just teaching, period, across the landscape. Not just here, but abroad as well. We are always confused. The Gilder Lehrman Center is confused with the Gilder Lehrman Institute, and that's fine. We're happy to be confused. Anyway, here's to public schools. They can't kill them. They can't. We won't let them. I have a few remarks. First of all, several other thank yous. I'm not going to remember everybody. There are a whole bunch of cool, wonderful historians here tonight. Martha Hodes is here. My colleague Ed Rugemer is here. I'm leaving out some people. Richard Rabinowitz is here. His wife Linda, great curators. And I apologize to all the rest of you I didn't see when you came in. And if any of you students are already great historians, I'm including you. And by the way, I was also grateful here. I usually have to speak after the students. I much prefer speaking before them because they knock it out. I think there are 5 on the menu here. They come and they do little bits and pieces, but it's always hard to follow the students, frankly. So I feel much more comfortable going before they speak. You may be aware that today's Abraham Lincoln's birthday. It's the 12th of February. Yeah. That guy's getting more and more recognition all the time. Lincoln's doing well. In fact, he's looking really good these days. Oh, well. You know, and I'm constantly asked, as I just was 2 days ago at an event, for the first time in my life, I went to teach 2 days ago at a prison in Connecticut. An extraordinary, painful, sobering, profound, difficult experience. A prison with 400 inmates, most of them dying for some kind of education, attention, care. And I went and lectured on Frederick Douglass. We also sent 12 of them a copy of my book. I spent a 2-hour seminar after the lecture with those 12 who had read the book, and they read the book. They have time. They don't scroll anything. They're not allowed any computers, any phones, anything. They're not even allowed to use pens. They can only take notes with pencils. And then their notes are surveilled by somebody before they leave the room. And before I left the room, many of them, the young ones, the old ones, and by the way, this is a prison with some desperate criminals who've done terrible things. But many of them just didn't want to leave. They just kept hanging around. They kept hanging around. They had question after question after question. And I swear, they kept asking about Lincoln and Douglas. You know, I would try to redirect it back onto Douglas. No, they wanted to know, what was that relationship? Okay, all right. What did they have in common? Well, there's a lot of answers. They were both prose poets. I was trying to do this off my head the other day, and I don't think I did it very well. Now I actually wrote a few things down. They were both kind of from nowhere and went somewhere. Both had a profound sense of humor. Different, but a profound sense of humor. And both had humility, a thing so lacking in our civilization. Lincoln's famous for his humility. Douglass may not be as famous for his humility, but he had it burnt into his soul. He knew it wasn't about him ultimately. He used a lot of I pronouns in his autobiographies because he had to, but he knew it was about something much bigger than him. He knew it was about getting out of his prison and doing something once he was out. Now, my job is really here simply to introduce members of our jury, members among our finalists for this prize, and then the winner. But first let me, because I will forget at the end, to thank my staff who are here. Michelle Zaks, Melissa McGrath, Tamara, Michelle, I don't think Daisha came. Here you are, all up front. There you are. And Dan Pinkel, who is here, who's one of our major supporters of the GLC, lives in New York. They do everything at the GLC. I just show up to introduce people. Now, I choose a jury every year, and we've had many, many juries now after 26 or 7 years. And this year we had a especially interesting jury. We had an Africanist who teaches in England, Toby Green. He's a professor of Lusophone African history at University College London. Toby couldn't make it over across the pond tonight because it's his birthday. Otherwise, he says he'd have been here. And then Juanita de Barros, who was our chair of this committee, was brilliant. She's an expert in Latin American history. She's currently a citizen of Canada, where she teaches at McGill, isn't it? I think she teaches at McGill. And she's a Canadian right now who chooses not to come to the United States. Sorry, it's the truth. She told me I could say that. But our third juror is here. It's Jamil Bowie up here in the front row. Jamil, most of you will know, is a great columnist for the New York Times, a deep reader of history. I've gotten to know Jamil over the years at various conferences, events we go to. He's been on panels with us. Jamil, thank you. And Jamil is sitting next to one of our finalists, and Jamil made quite a case, Keidrick, for your book, because he loved it. And he couldn't stop telling us all the people he had recommended it to. So, I mean, that's what jurors are supposed to do. That's what they're supposed to do. Thank you, Jamil, again, for serving on the jury. And I want to name the other finalists, indeed. There were 3 other finalists. One is Makhroufi Ousmane Traoré. His book is called Slavery, Resistance, and Identity in Early Modern West Africa, the Ethnic State of Gajaga. It's Cambridge University Press. This committee, this jury, said it's a masterpiece, a monumental work about a region of Senegal and the people who lived there and their engagements with human trafficking and the culture they developed in the face of it. A unique book, an original book, amazing research. It has all the markings of a book that should be winning prizes, if not this one, then in African history for sure. A second finalist was Gloria McCahon Whiting. Her book is called Belonging, An Intimate History of Slavery and Family in Early New England. This was an amazing work of research into sources. You have to have 5 eyes to find deep research into the local communities, into households in colonial New England, particularly Massachusetts, and how black people were living in so many colonial homes. And the way she was able to get at their stories was truly remarkable. The book is called Belonging, Get It, by Gloria McCahon Whiting. She teaches at the University of Wisconsin. And our other finalist is here tonight, Keidrick Roy, whose book is American Dark Age, Racial Feudalism and the Rise of Black Liberalism. This is a brilliant work of mostly 19th, but it begins in the 19th century American intellectual history. It shows us that all over anti-slavery thinking and abolitionists of all sorts, and even non-abolitionists, was this use of the feudal past, of the language of feudalism, the ideas and the structures of feudalism. And what came out of it was a kind of, he shows, invention of early liberalism. This is serious intellectual history, the kind I was actually trained on. And it was wonderful to read your book, Keidrick. You were up against another good one, though, I have to say. So congratulations, and I think I have a plaque for you, if you can come up here. Congratulations, Keidrick. He's currently, I think, on the faculty at Dartmouth. Right. Used to be in the Society of Fellows at Harvard, that famous organization. Yes, now, we have a winner. I want to say a few words about the book and then bring Justene up here. This is a book, as you know by now, is about the Freedman's Bank, or the Savings and Trust, as it was called. And both of those words have deep meaning in this book. Freedman's Bank has always been a book waiting for somebody to write its history. It's one of those kinds of books. Why didn't somebody do this before, to the kind of depth that Justene has? You may also know, or not, that Frederick Douglass was the last president of this bank, and it was probably the most embarrassing part of his life. It died on his watch, which was the last 4 months of the existence of the bank. I'll let Justene tell you a little bit more about the details of the history of the bank. But he had to keep after it died on his watch, he admitted to public humiliation. He had to testify to Congress. He testified in 1880 for like parts of 2 days about why did the bank fail and what happened and so on and so on and so on. It's a brutal story. It's a horrible story. But as Justene says at the very outset of the book, she says this is both a profound story of hope and promise and a tragedy. It's both, like so many things in history and life. It was a beautiful rise and a terrible fall. In that testimony to Congress, Douglass admitted, he said, quote, that he knew nothing about banking. Oh, Fred. He said, my life had been a theoretical one rather than a practical one on the stump. Now, he meant something different about theoretical than we probably mean when we use that term in the academy today. My life had been more theoretical than a practical one on the stump, and he says, I hesitated about it until I was persuaded that as the colored people had confidence in me, I should do it. He did. He regretted it. So be it. It was one of his human flaws. Justene has written a stunning book, and it isn't just about banking. Although nothing against banking. It isn't just economic history. It's a kind of social, even in the end, moral history. It's a rise and fall story. It's a rich story from deep archives. But she wrote it for, as I like to say, for real people, for real readers, beyond the academy. It's a hell of a story. And the ramifications of the demise of the Freedman's Bank are in many ways still with us. I will let Justene explain that. And I will let Justene introduce her wonderful family members who have come with her. But Justene, congratulations. Please come up. We have some stuff for you. You are the winner. It's like the Academy Awards, but we're not on TV and on timing, you know. You are the winner of the 27th annual Frederick Douglass Prize. As Jim said, the list of people who've won this prize over the years, and the finalists as well, is the entire who's who have ever studied this field. It begins here with a medallion specially made in New Haven every year. I'll let you take it out later. You have a wall piece, a nice plaque that goes, that's more than a plaque, that go, oh, and then there's a check. I forgot. That's part of it too. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, David, for the warm introduction. And wow, this is a packed house. Very happy to see everyone here. And of course, happy Black History Month, everyone. Thank you to the teams at the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History and the Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition at Yale for organizing such a wonderful series of events. My appreciation as well to the judges, Juanita DeBarros, Jamel Bowie, and Toby Green for their serious consideration and for undertaking the Herculean task of reading such dynamic scholarship. And to the finalists, Keidrick, I'm happy to see you in the audience. I'm in awe of your work, and I look forward to reading the work that you will produce in the future and to being in conversation about such important topics. And thank you to the students that I've had the opportunity to meet and to speak with for your riveting questions about the craft of history, the craft of writing, and importantly, the history of American slavery. I must thank my family and friends, some of whom are here this evening, my mother, Deborah Bryan, who flew out from California for this celebration. My Uncle Stu, my godmother Dorothy, thank you for your steadfast love, support, and guidance. You believed in me and this project every step of the way, and I could not be more grateful. Thank you, and I love you, and of course, if you read the dedication to my mother, this book is for you. To my husband, Kenneth, and my daughter, Kennedy, they have been with me, alongside me, through this tumultuous journey of conceptualizing, researching, writing, and editing this book as it evolved from an idea to what it is today. Kenneth and I had many conversations about the intricacies of financial services, of banking regulation and supervision, and prudential governance. And my daughter proofread several chapters of this book, and I knew that if she understood it and could engage with it, that I was on the right track. So they have been an integral part of my process, and I have deep and profound love and appreciation for their love and support and their guidance. And to my editor at WW Norton, John Durbin, who I don't see. Hi, John. Good to see you. I am so privileged to have you as a partner in this process. We first met in 2017 at the Southern Historical Association conference. And I knew that I wanted my second book to be a Norton book, and I knew I wanted to work with John. And so I am deeply honored to have you as a partner in this process and to work with the amazing publishing professionals at Norton that helped me guide this book from an idea to what you have in your hands. And I also must thank my agent, Tanya McKinnon. She is a force. She provided me with a great depth of knowledge, encouragement, and importantly, an intensity about the topic of African American history that continues to inspire me to research and write books that expose the Black experience in new and in poignant ways. I am fortunate to be among dynamic and brilliant colleagues and students at the University of Virginia. In fact, one of my graduate students, Bethany Bell. Bethany, raise your hand, wave your hand. Hi, Bethany. Bethany is here today. And I feel, yes. I feel so fortunate to have friends and colleagues who support this process of writing African American history. And though writing is often a solitary experience, I don't know if I could have written this book without the insights, the questions, and the support that my community provides me at the University of Virginia. I've had the pleasure of speaking about the history of the Freedmen's Bank in a variety of venues. And what I have typically begun with is a call, or an urging, if you will, for members of the audience to think about the idea of trust, especially in terms of the relationship that you have with the financial institution with which you choose to engage. And while I do want to come back to the idea of trust, I would be remiss if I didn't draw our collective attention to our current location. We are less than 2 blocks away from where the main office of the Freedman Savings and Trust Company, also known as the Freedmen's Bank, once stood. It was housed in a building where, on April 4th, 1865, the trustees of the bank began operations. Located on 87 Cedar Street, it was 2 blocks away from the New York Stock Exchange. The bank's white trustees did not select the location of the bank's main office haphazardly. The central office's location from 1865 to 1867, again, a mere 2 blocks from where we are now, represented the connections between the world of finance and the economic aspirations of Black Americans during the period of Reconstruction. But this location at 87 Cedar Street also represented the dangers of capitalism left unchecked, especially its ramifications for African Americans. After all, white bankers on Wall Street were often indifferent to and sometimes openly hostile towards Black people, especially runaway slaves during the era of enslavement. Despite this reality, though, by establishing the bank's small foothold near other financial institutions, the white administrators of the Freedmen's Bank communicated their bigger plans of making the bank a prosperous institution when it was established in 1865. But prosperous for whom? The freed people or the bank trustees themselves? That would become a larger and a more pressing concern. And this tension between what the bank's white administrators wanted and what Black bank depositors needed and desired is at the heart of the history of the Freedmen's Bank and is at the heart of Savings and Trust. In Savings and Trust, I offer readers a new history of the Freedmen's Bank through the lens of the people who invested in it, African Americans, and through the people who accelerated its collapse, the bank's white administrators, whose mismanagement and theft communicated a devastating message to Black Americans. That message was that neither the banking industry nor federal authorities would protect them or their economic interest after the slow end of slavery. I had 3 main goals with Savings and Trust. First, I wanted to put the bank's collapse at the center of conversations about the history of Reconstruction. Second, I wanted to bring the history of American slavery, its aftermath, and the experiences of formerly enslaved people into the history of American finance. And third, I wanted to write about the Freedmen's Bank in a way that would be both accessible and compelling. Because I fundamentally believed and continue to believe that this story is as enthralling as it is heartbreaking, as instructive as it is enraging. And I wanted to convey all of these emotions to the reader. Ultimately, I wanted to write a book about American finance and banking that put Black people, their lives, their aspirations, and their experiences at the forefront to understand the stakes of the bank's quick rise and disastrous fall. I highlight Black Americans such as Enon and Effer Wright, brothers from Alabama who opened accounts in July of 1868, depositing into their accounts $1,000 and $600 respectively. I introduced Mrs. Ellen Baptiste Lubin, an African-American woman from New Orleans who in July of 1866 opened an account in her own name, perhaps to demonstrate to her 2 daughters the benefits of economic self-sufficiency in the new age of freedom. I also talk about the Harris family of Richmond, Virginia. On February 5th, 1870, 2 days after the ratification of the 15th Amendment, Robert and Betsy Harris took the bold step of introducing their 11-year-old daughter, Mary Susan, to financial tools that they hoped would help her understand better how to manage her financial life in the exciting but unpredictable and often violent era of Reconstruction. They opened her account with her father making the first deposit. And there's, of course, Frederick Douglass, the last president of the Freedmen's Bank, who had put his name and reputation on the line, believing wholeheartedly in the economic potential of Black Americans, despite the bank's impending failure. There are many ways to tell the history of the Freedmen's Bank. One is a story of triumph, especially for African Americans such as the Wright brothers, Mrs. Lubin, and the Harris family. African Americans invested in their own economic futures by opening accounts and putting millions of dollars collectively into the bank. Over its 9 years of operation, the bank accumulated approximately $57 million over more than 70,000 accounts. Conservatively today, that would be at least $1.5 billion, the vast majority of which deposited by African Americans recently emancipated from slavery. Black Americans comprised 90% of the bank's depositors by 1864, when the bank collapsed. Black depositors helped to make the Freedmen's Bank one of the most successful financial institutions of the 19th century. However, the other story of the bank is one of tragedy. The bank's administrators doomed the institution to failure. By mismanaging the bank's deposits, gambling with depositors' money, lending money flagrantly to their friends and business partners, making risky and illegal loans to themselves, and using the bank's funds to fuel their own risky economic pursuits, the trustees and managers undermine Black people's trust in the banking industry, and this mistrust will last for generations. And the Freedmen's Bank and its failure had visible implications on Black communities across the nation. It is in the bank's collapse that we can understand the sometimes predatory relationship between the financial services industry and the African American community. This relationship began not in the 20th century, but during the era of Reconstruction, a moment of great economic and political promise for African Americans and for the nation. So thank you for this award. I am humbled, I am honored. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ananya Mandrakar, and I am a sophomore at Milburn High School in New Jersey.
And hello, my name is Shakoy Moody. I am a junior at Equality Charter High School in the Bronx.
I am a member of the Gilder Lehrman Institute's Student Advisory Council. The SAC is comprised of history-loving students from all 50 states, and we even have members from around the globe. As SAC members, we provide feedback to the Gilder Lehrman team about their programs and get to hear from interesting speakers. The SAC is also a great way to meet with other people our age with a similar interest in history. It is an honor to be here representing the GLI and the SAC.
And I know about the Gilder Lehrman Institute through the Hamilton Education Program. I participated in the EduHam at school, ultimately creating and performing a rap about John Lawrence. And it was this past November where me and my friends actually got to perform the rap here with Lin-Manuel Miranda and Ken Burns in attendance, alongside 400 other students cheering us on. And I'm honored to be back here representing the GLI.
We are thrilled to be here today to lead the audience Q&A with tonight's winner, Professor Justene Hill Edwards. We have a few questions to get this started, some of which you all submitted ahead of time.
For our first question tonight, you kind of already touched base on this. I'll wait for you, girl. Take your time. Y'all hear that? Yo. Anyway. For our first question tonight, you kind of already touched base on it, but what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, thank you both so much. I want to give you a round of applause. I had an opportunity to have conversations with them, and it's always so inspiring to be able to share my passion about history, especially African American history, with students. So it was a pleasure to meet you both. This book really started about 10 years ago. I finished my PhD at Princeton in 2015, and I had started my tenure track job at the University of Virginia. I was kind of doing all the things that a young assistant professor does, which is really start to finish the first book. And I was thinking, of course, about what I wanted my next project to be. And at the time, I lived in Washington, D.C., and there were 2 plaques that were erected, I believe in 2016, outside of the building where the Freedman's Bank's main office in Washington that was erected in 1871 stood. And so my now husband comes home one day and he asks me about the Freedman's Bank. And I felt like I should have known more, being trained in African American history and American slavery, but I didn't know much about it. And so, of course, as a good trained historian, I looked at the secondary literature, I looked to see what other historians had written, and I was surprised that there wasn't much written about the Freedman's Bank. There were 2 books at the time, the first one published in 1924, and the second one published in 1976, and that kind of blew my mind that there wasn't more scholarship on this bank, and this was around the period of time when historians like myself were really interested in studying the history of the intersection of slavery, race, and capitalism. And so I spent the next few years finishing my first book on free markets and launched immediately into writing the second book, which was on the Freedman's Bank. And so that's kind of how the idea came to be. It was really about 10 years in the making, kind of having this question about what the bank was, realizing that there wasn't as much scholarship on it as I thought that there would have been, and then launching myself into the work of understanding this history and the story of the bank.
Fine.
Thank you, Professor. Now we'd like to open up the floor to questions from the audience. If you have questions for Professor Hill Edwards, please raise your hand. An usher will bring you a microphone so you can ask your question. Your questions can range from the subject matter of the books to the broad research required for writing books such as these, or even her experience as a college professor.
I have a question right there.
What did it take for you to become a college professor at Princeton? And how hard versus how rewarding was it when you got there?
Well, I think you're referring to my PhD experience at Princeton. I say this quite a bit. Princeton, for me, was the perfect place to do a PhD. It prepared me, I think, for the rigor of being a college professor, especially at a place like the University of Virginia. I worked under the famed historian Tara Hunter, where she taught me how to be a rigorous historian, how to look into the archive, how to ask hard questions, how to kind of think broadly about what my intervention was going to be. And so interestingly enough, it was that experience of the kind of rigor of graduate school that I think prepared me for what the life of a historian and a writer would be, kind of sitting with the archival sources, thinking creatively about how to get at the voices that may not be directly writing those sources that I'm reading, and thinking critically about kind of broader historical questions that I might want to ask in terms of how I go about and think about my own research. And so it was a great place, and I get to kind of put that on display as I teach at UVA.
If you had any advice to give me to like get into like an Ivy League school like Princeton, what would it be?
That is, hey, why not take the opportunity, right? I think that, of course, hard work nothing will beat hard work. I did my undergraduate degree at Swarthmore College, and I think in many ways, having that experience of being at a small, rigorous institution like Swarthmore prepared me to be at Princeton, and then prepared me to be a professor. And it's really getting comfortable with the discomfort of hard work. I think that is a very, very important skill. But I appreciate you asking that question.
Hello? Hi, I have a quick question, and that is...
I'm not sure where you are.
I'm
in the
right
back.
here.
Hello.
Sorry. Were you able to get a sense of what % of the wealth of Black America was wiped out by the collapse of the Freedman's Bank?
Sure. Some economists believe that in certain communities at least half of the wealth of African Americans was lost when the bank failed in 1874. And it took about 2 generations for that to be rebuilt. And so in many ways, the failure of the Freedman's Bank had indelible consequences on African Americans' ability to kind of rebuild the wealth that was lost. And then we have kind of the generational consequences of this really fraught relationship between African American communities and traditionally white financial institutions. In fact, after the failure of the Freedman's Bank, really at the end of the 19th century, we see the investment in Black communities of Black financial institutions in places like Washington, D.C., and Richmond, Virginia, and Durham, North Carolina. And so even though the failure of the Freedman's Bank is this catastrophic moment, African American communities start to kind of turn inward and start to kind of invest in themselves to build their own economic and financial infrastructures to support their own communities.
So I'd like to ask, what made you decide to become a historian?
Sorry, say that again?
What made you decide to become a historian?
Oh, that is a great question. I am as surprised as anyone, actually, that I'm a historian. I didn't really develop a love of history until after college. I graduated from Swarthmore with a degree, interestingly enough, in Spanish. And when I was a junior, I studied abroad in Spain, and there was something about that experience that made me want to understand more about the Black experience in the U.S. It was really that semester that kind of sparked my real curiosity. And then I did what I think a lot of undergrads do when they're really not sure what they want to do, but they feel like they have some really good skills. They decide to go to law school. I am fortunate in that I worked at a law firm for 2 years after I went to college, and I did not like it. It was one of those experiences where it was so terrible that it revealed to me what I didn't want to do. And so I actually had this moment where I sat at my computer and I couldn't write my personal statement for law school. I didn't have anything compelling to say. But I quickly understood that I liked and I loved my Black Studies classes in college. I loved learning about African American history. I wasn't quite into slavery quite yet, but I was really interested in studying the African diaspora. And so I got a master's in African diaspora studies at Florida International University in Miami. And so not only did I have 2 beautiful years in the sunniness of South Florida, but I also got a real education in what the type of scholar that I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to study history because a lot of the questions that I ask, they had to do with history. I wanted to understand the transatlantic slave trade. I wanted to understand the enslaved experience in places like Newport, in places like Boston. I wanted to understand the lives and experiences of Black women in Charleston. And so that was really the kind of process of me accepting that perhaps history is something that I could do, and being a historian is something that I wanted to pursue. But it really did take a few years for me to kind of come to that conclusion. And it was then that I decided that I wanted to be trained as a historian of slavery, because there were so many questions that I had about kind of the state of America at the time that I understood slavery would unlock for me.
Thank you so much, Professor. Your description of the failure of the Freedman Bank reminded me of some fairly recent events where some banks were deemed too big to fail and others were not big enough, and so they did fail. And I was wondering whether there was any government oversight of banks at that time, and whether there were other banks with primarily white investors that were bailed out.
Sure. So no bailouts, but 1873 and 74 were really important years for the landscape of American finance. And so the Freedmen's Bank was not the only bank to collapse in 1874, but it was the biggest bank in terms of the number of depositors and the size of deposits lost to fail. And we were talking about a period of time during the 1860s and 1870s when the kind of system of American finance was undergoing some evolution. We have our first financial regulator created in 1863, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and ideally, the OCC would have regulated the Freedmen's Bank. But one of the kind of loopholes in this history of the Freedmen's Bank was that Congress was supposed to regulate the bank. It did not. There were supposed to have been regular examinations, but the first examination actually didn't happen until February of 1873. And so, again, the bank was established in March of 1865. The first examination was not had until February of 1873. And when it was publicized, the comptroller essentially says that, yes, the bank is over-leveraged, there are millions of dollars outstanding in loans, depositors don't have access to their money, but we have every faith in the good men of the Board of Trustees, and they will right the ship. Subsequently, that does not happen. There's another examination in February of 1874. It is more extensive. About half of the bank's branches are examined, and it is incredibly damning. Essentially, the comptroller reveals that the bank is essentially on the brink of disaster, and it is kind of in a very perilous position. And interestingly, it is in this moment in February and March of 1874 when Frederick Douglass is asked to be the bank's last president. And so he kind of comes into this position. He has every hope that he can right the ship, that he can restore Black confidence in this financial institution. But he sits down, he looks at the books, and he is stunned, he's humiliated, and he is shocked that not only was he asked to be the president at this time, but that the bank, again, is over-leveraged. There's millions of dollars, about $3.5 million of loans that were outstanding. The majority of these loans were essentially in default. The white residents of D.C. who received loans from the bank had just not paid back their financial obligations, and so all of this is going on in 1874, and then it finally is forced to close on July 2nd, 1874. And so your question about the kind of regulation is incredibly important, because again, we're talking about a period of time when financial regulation is starting to have teeth, but those types of regulatory authorities aren't really applied, unfortunately, to the Freedman's Bank.
Who are the people that lost all their money and that collapsed the Freedman's Bank? Are these mostly like urban dwellers in the South, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the Freedman's Bank had a pretty extensive footprint. It was the financial institution with the most bank branches in the nation at the time. And so at its height, there were about 37 branches as far north as here in New York, as far south as Tallahassee, Florida, and as far west as St. Louis. And so there were branches in places with the highest density of the Black population. And so we have New York, we have Philadelphia, we have Washington, D.C. New Bern, North Carolina, interestingly enough, had the highest population of Black women. As depositors, about 40%, New Orleans. And so it had a fairly big footprint. And so that's where we see most of the Black wealth losses in those places, with bank branches which were kind of spread out throughout the mid-Atlantic and really the former Confederate South.
So, Dr. Edwards, congratulations and thank you for writing this important book. I'm curious to know, you said that Congress held hearings and Frederick Douglass testified. Were there ever any findings of malfeasance or corruption on the part of the trustees? Were there any consequences for these people? Was Congress persuaded that they had behaved inappropriately?
Yeah. So yes, there were 3 congressional inquiries. The first was an immediate debrief in the fall of 1874. The second was in 1876, and it was held by a congressman from Virginia named Beverly Douglass. He was a former member of the Confederacy, a Confederate general, and he actually has a pretty fulsome examination in terms of congressional inquiry. He essentially says that Republicans were taking advantage of African Americans, and that the bank was kind of a representation of the complicity of Republicans in African Americans' kind of financial failures. And so even though he was incredibly partisan, and this particular inquiry was incredibly partisan, there's some really interesting information that comes out of it. They call as many of the trustees to testify as possible. And so we learn that the bank's trustees, especially the bank's finance committee, had been just making loans to their friends and business partners. The loans were supposed to be secured by half of the kind of value of the loan in property, but there were stocks. YMCA stock was interestingly used to secure a few loans. Howard University received a pretty sizable loan. And so all of this information comes out. The most fulsome examination, though, happens in 1879 and 1880. And this examination is a really important one because we have the testimony of Douglass, We have the testimony of Henry Cook, who at this period of time was an incredibly influential banker. He was the brother of investment banker Jay Cook, and Jay Cook founded Jay Cook and Company, the nation's first investment bank. And so Henry Cook is called to testify, and he basically shirks a responsibility, which is fascinating and enraging because Henry Cook receives the largest loan from the Freedman's Bank for at least $500,000. And so he's called to testify, and he essentially, again, shirks responsibility for any wrongdoing. And so we have these congressional inquiries. No one is held to account for the bank's failure. In the aftermath, really until the 1930s, African Americans are continuing to ask congressmen and senators, they ask attorneys general, comptrollers, even presidents for recompense. There is this a series of really interesting letters from a black family to FDR in the late 1930s, and they are essentially begging him to reopen a congressional inquiry into the bank's failure. And again, this is kind of in the aftermath of the Great Depression. And so we have African Americans really attempting to use any power that they have to kind of influence politicians to look into the bank's failure, but unfortunately to no avail.
Hi, my name is Brenda Dominguez Alvarado. I am a junior at Cristo Rey New York High School. As someone who's interested in social justice and advocacy, I was wondering what's a piece of advice you would give to those who are interested in advocating for their communities?
Oh. I mean, I am a big fan of, again, community-based activism, finding ways that you can contribute your actions, your energy to improving your own communities. It might be starting within your school, finding issues that you feel particularly passionate about and kind of investing in those. And so I often like to think that it starts kind of closer to home in that respect, finding ways for your kind of footprint to be more important and more meaningful.
One more question.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Julia. I am from Trinity Youth After School. My question is, what is something you aim to uncover and research more for the future? And if not more research, what do you plan to do for later in life?
Oh, later in life. Continuing to write books. My editor is here, so I'm sure John likes to hear that. Again, I am trained as a historian of slavery. I'm deeply invested in African American history. I continue to be interested in kind of economic inequality writ large. I am writing a book now, and don't laugh, it is a short history of inequality in America. I am really interested in kind of the intersection of kind of race, of class, the influence of kind of capitalism, and the ways in which we see this play out in American history. And so I consider myself a historian of Black economic life in America. And so I do anticipate that my work will continue to explore those really important questions about, in particular, the ways in which African Americans have kind of navigated American economic life in terms of wealth building, in terms of financial ideas about their own economic power. I'm really interested in these questions.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Professor Hill Edwards. Come on. Love to see it. I gotta say, thank you, Black Queen. Thank you. And with that being said, to everybody in the room, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you all for remembering and honoring Frederick Douglass. His work gave a voice to those who cannot be heard and continues to have a major impact on the United States. So congratulations again to the recipient of the 27th Annual Frederick Douglass Book Prize Award. Can I get an amen? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We'd also like to thank the donors who supported this year's Frederick Douglass Book Prize and whose support allows us to provide this program for free. This prize helps to ensure that African American history is firmly situated in the mainstream of American history, and we are deeply grateful for their support. The Gilder Lehrman Institute has a whole range of public programs and resources for teachers, students, and history lovers. We hope that you will check out our website for more information on upcoming programs and to get further engaged with the Institute. The Institute, as well as our partner, the Gilder Lehrman Center at Yale, will have materials in Trinity Commons if you would like to learn more tonight.
Speaking of, for our adult guests, we invite you to head through these doors for a reception in the Trinity Commons, and for the students and the school groups in the room, you can exit the way you came in through the doors in the back of the church. With that, thank you for joining us this evening. Congratulations again to Professor Hill Edwards. And everyone have a nice evening. Hope to see you at another GLI event.